about object-oriented programming. If you enjoy the rest of the video, give me a thumbs up, and also if you want to learn more, you can subscribe my channel. If you have a question, comment below. Let's go! Well, object-oriented programming is optional and you don't need use just to get started. It is useful for who works strategically, and if you are new or you want to work simply, you can use function instead. And I have learned OOP from this book. And the good news is that OOP is much simpler to use and understand in Python than the other language such as C++ or Java. Okay, let's coding. We talk too much as always. Okay, let's create a class. You can create a class by use a class keyword really simply, and also the name of your class and the colon. Be careful, it's better to use the first letter capital in your class name, and then use a pass keyword. Here use a pass keyword to show that whenever you use a pass, you can complete your class later and you can run your code without any error. For example, here I run my code, we don't have any error. And if you want to create an object, simply write the name of your object and the name of your class actually with parentheses. It's the object of your class. It is really simply, this one is really simple form of class and object. Every object should have behavior, and the behavior in the class are called method. We can define a method as a function. Let me define some function here. Here I define a coordinate function and I pass some parameters such as xo, yo, xd and yd. And I want to talk about the self here. Self is not a parameter, it is like a symbol. It shows that we can access by the object to this, for example, function by itself, or to this parameter by itself. Let me show you by example. For example, look at here, a.coordinate. Look at here, we can access to the coordinate function. Coordinate, and we need to pass the parameter. Look at here, it shows me just xo, yo, xd and yd, not self, because self is not parameter. I randomly pass some just number to show you we can access coordinate, and also we can access this parameter because it has a self symbol. Look at here, for example, xo, xd, xo. It's bring for me because it can recognize, for example, xo, and let me print it here. Okay, yes, 1. xo, it's 1 because we pass 1 to the coordinate function. But if I remove the self, what does it happen? Let me run it. I get an error and it said that coordinate takes 4 positional arguments, but 5 are given. Look at here, it gets xo as a symbol of self, and it said that you have just 3 parameters to pass into the coordinate, but you give 4. Look at here, it said that xo is as a self, but it is not. Actually, it is our parameter. We can define the other name instead of self, but I haven't seen yet. Most of the people just use a self. Let's define another method. Okay, up to here we define two functions. Let me run these two functions. The first one, coordinate, and then I want to print d, for example, this, and then run it. Execute. I should run it, but I execute. Okay. It show us 4. It means that it does at the first time it go into the coordinate and initialize xo, xd, yo, and yd, and then go to the this function. Self xo it's 1, self xd it's 3, and self yo it's 2, and self yd it's 4, and calculate these sentences and then return d. We print here the d. Okay, what does the coordinate do here? The coordinate actually initialize some parameter, but in a class in OOP in Python, the initialize function has a special method, a special name, and their name is init. And also you don't need to define, for example, you don't need to define here o.coordinate or o.init. It just whenever you define your object, you pass the parameter, the initialized parameter here. For example, here we need to pass xo, yo, xd, and yd, and I randomly just pass some number. Here, look at here, xo, yo, xd, yd, and it doesn't need to call, for example, init. Yes? And whenever I want to run this program, it shows us 7, and it doesn't need to run this function and call this function actually. Up to now, we learned a lot about OOP, and just with this video, we can handle most of our OOP project, and also in next video we talked about the super method, local variable, and the global variable. Don't forget to push the subscribe button to show you the next video very soon. Bye bye.